In a dark, high-tech chamber, the leaders of the Galactic Council sat around a massive table, their faces illuminated only by the glow of holographic screens, displaying intergalactic maps. Their discussions were cold, calculated, and ruthless. The fate of Earth had already been decided. The Council had deemed the human race weak, primitive, barely worth notice in the grand scheme of the galaxy. They had dismissed humanity's potential, seeing Earth as nothing more than an obstacle in their quest for power. "Earth is nothing but a dying rock," one of the commanders sneered. "Its people are divided, unprepared. We will crush them easily." Another officer nodded in agreement. "Their technology is outdated. This will be like squashing an insect. We should have done it years ago." The room was filled with laughter, a mocking echo that reverberated through the cold, metallic walls. The leaders felt secure in their power, confident that nothing could stand in their way. After all, the Galactic Council controlled the most advanced technology in the known universe, from AI that could think faster than any human mind, to fleets of warships capable of obliterating entire planets. They were unstoppable. Humanity, with its crude weapons and limited space travel, was nothing compared to them. But just as the meeting seemed to reach its climax, an unexpected anomaly flashed across their monitors. A signal, a disturbance, was detected near Earth's orbit. At first it was small, barely noticeable, a faint blip in their vast surveillance grid. But as the Council's top scientists zoomed in on the data, the room fell silent. The signal wasn't supposed to be there. It didn't match any known patterns, nor did it come from any recognizable source. One of the scientists spoke up, his voice trembling. This is impossible. We have a cloaked ship entering Earth's atmosphere. It's human-made." The commanders exchanged uneasy glances. Impossible. The humans had no such technology, or so they had believed. Before anyone could respond, the silence was broken by a chilling transmission that cut through the static. A voice, calm and cold, echoed through the chamber. "You've made a fatal mistake." The voice was clear, precise. Too clear for a human to be speaking from Earth. The ship was cloaked, yet it had managed to send this message directly into the heart of the Galactic Council's communication systems. The voice continued, a slight hint of amusement in its tone. "You've underestimated humanity. You'll soon regret that." The transmission ended abruptly. The Council's officers looked at each other, confused, then alarmed. They quickly checked their systems for any sign of a breach. What they found sent a wave of panic through the room. A surge of activity flooded their surveillance systems, a pattern they couldn't trace. The Vanguard, the ship sending the message, had already infiltrated their most secure networks. It had accessed classified data, bypassing their most sophisticated defenses. The room was now filled with a low hum of panic. The commanders realized, too late, that the humans had been preparing for this moment. Earth was not defenseless. The Vanguard was a ship of unimaginable power, cloaked by technology far beyond what the Council had thought humanity capable of. One of the commanders slammed his fist onto the table, his voice laced with fury. "This is an act of war. Mobilize everything. Now." But it was already too late. The Vanguard had already begun its counterattack, using the very technology the Galactic Council had so arrogantly dismissed as human weakness. As they scrambled to prepare for what they now feared could be an all-out assault, the Vanguard silently powered up its weapon systems, prepared to unleash a vengeance the Council had never anticipated. And so the first shots were fired, not by the mighty Galactic Council, but by the humans they had so arrogantly mocked. The battle for Earth had begun. As the Vanguard launched its first strike against the Galactic Council, the atmosphere on Earth was charged with anticipation. High above, in a secret military base hidden deep in the mountains, Captain Riker paced back and forth, his mind racing. The order had come down. Destroy the galactic warship that had breached Earth's atmosphere. The mission was simple in its scope, but brutal in its execution. This was a suicide run. There was no coming back. Riker knew it. His team knew it. And yet there was no hesitation. Humanity had been pushed to the brink, and now it was their turn to strike back. The Galactic warship, an experimental behemoth cloaked in nearly impenetrable shields and bristling with advanced weaponry, had entered Earth's orbit. It wasn't just a symbol of the Galactic Council's might. It was a direct threat to everything the human race had worked to protect. Riker's mission was clear: infiltrate the ship, destroy its core systems, and take down its shield generator before it could devastate the planet below. The odds were stacked against them. The warship was far more advanced than anything Earth had, but Riker knew one thing: the humans had something the Council didn't: determination. He gathered his team of elite soldiers, each handpicked for their skills, courage, and loyalty. Sergeant Bonner, his right-hand man, was by his side. Bonner was more than just a soldier. He was a brother in arms, someone who had fought by Riker's side through countless missions. They had both seen the horrors of war, but neither of them had ever faced anything like this. "Listen up." Riker's voice was steady, but there was an edge of steel in it. "This is going to be the hardest mission we've ever had. The ship we're going after is unlike anything we've ever seen. It's heavily armored, heavily defended, and it's controlled by an AI that can think faster than any of us. But we're not backing down. We're human, and we got one thing they don't: heart. We get in, we disable that shield generator, and we get out." "Understood." The team nodded, grim expressions on their faces. They all knew the stakes. They were the underdogs in this war, but it didn't matter. The fight for survival had begun, and they would give everything to protect their planet. They boarded their cloaked assault ship, the Spectre, which blended seamlessly into the night sky. As they ascended into orbit, Riker couldn't help but think about what was at stake. They were heading into the heart of enemy territory, into the belly of a beast that could wipe out entire nations with a single blast. But they had no choice. Earth had already been marked for destruction. There would be no second chances. The warship came into view as they approached, massive, sleek, and intimidating. It was surrounded by a fleet of automated drones, each one a sentinel that could tear through anything that came too close. But the Spectre was equipped with the latest cloaking technology, a breakthrough that made them invisible to the warship's sensors. The ship drifted closer, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. "Almost there," Riker muttered under his breath. The atmosphere was electric with the combined weight of anticipation and fear. When they finally docked on the warship's outer hull, Riker signaled for his team to disembark. They were inside enemy territory now, and every moment counted. The warship was a labyrinth of metallic corridors, filled with deadly eye-controlled security systems. The only thing standing between Riker's team and success was their will to survive, and the relentless threat of being discovered. As they crept through the narrow hallways, they encountered the first wave of opposition. The eye-controlled guards, designed to be faster and more efficient than any human soldier, emerged from the shadows, their weapons raised. Riker's team opened fire immediately, their weapons lighting up the darkness in a flash of bright white light. The AI guards were relentless, firing back with deadly accuracy, but the humans were faster, more unpredictable. They had something the machines didn't: instinct. "Keep moving." Riker barked, leading the charge. They fought their way through the warship's defense systems, each step bringing them closer to their objective. The sound of gunfire and explosions reverberated through the ship's metal walls, but there was no turning back. The shield generator was their target, and nothing would stop them. But the deeper they went, the more fierce the resistance became. Automated drones buzzed through the air like angry hornets, while turrets mounted on the walls fired relentlessly at the intruders. Riker's team was relentless too. They had trained for this moment their whole lives. Their hearts pounded in their chests, adrenaline pumping through their veins as they fought to survive. It was then that disaster struck. As they neared the shield generator, Sergeant Bonner, who had been leading the charge, was pinned down by a wave of AI guards. Riker turned just in time to see Bonner's position being overwhelmed. The explosion that followed was deafening. Bonner had triggered a grenade to take down a group of enemies, sacrificing himself to ensure the team's survival. "Bonner!" Riker shouted, but there was no time to mourn. The shield generator was within reach, and Bonner's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. Riker pushed forward, his mind focused on the mission. He and his team reached the shield generator, and with a series of precise strikes, they disabled it. The warship's defenses began to falter, its shields flickering and then collapsing entirely. Riker had done it. He had taken down the most formidable defense Earth had ever faced. As they made their way back to the Spectre, Riker's mind was heavy with grief. Bonner's sacrifice would weigh on him forever, but they had accomplished the impossible. They had struck the first blow against the Galactic Council, and they had done it with everything they had. The underdog humans had proven their worth, and the war had only just begun. Riker looked out into the vastness of space, the stars shining bright ahead. Humanity had a long road ahead of them, but they had shown that they could fight, no matter the odds. The battle for Earth was far from over, but one thing was certain. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity, and now they would pay the price. The Spectre descended back onto Earth, its hull scared and battered from the intense battle aboard the galactic warship. Riker's team was exhausted but resolute. The mission had been a success. At least, that's what they thought. As they returned to base, a dark shadow loomed over them. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the reality of their success starting to sink in. Captain Riker stepped off the ship first, his boots making a dull thud against the cold ground. His face was hard, but the grief from Bonner's death was evident in his eyes. He had lost his closest friend, the person who had always been by his side, but there was no time for mourning. Earth's survival was at stake, and Riker knew the war was far from over. They were met by General Aldridge, the commanding officer of Earth's remaining forces. His face was grim as he surveyed the returning team. "Riker, we need to talk," he said quietly. Riker nodded, sensing the urgency in Aldridge's tone. Inside the war room, Riker and his team were briefed on the terrifying news. The Galactic Council had unveiled a new weapon, something that would change the entire course of the war. It wasn't just another fleet or a new kind of ship. No, this was something far worse. The Council had created Nemesis, a super-intelligent eye, the likes of which humanity had never seen. Nemesis wasn't just a program. It was a force of nature, capable of controlling entire fleets of advanced warships with perfect precision. It had the ability to analyze situations in real time, adapt to any strategy, and outthink any human commander. Riker's mind raced as he tried to process the implications. This wasn't just a threat to Earth, it was an existential crisis. Nebula 3, Daedalus Station, the power grids, everything is under attack, Aldridge said, his voice strained. Nemesis is already deploying waves of robotic forces, and we're scrambling just to hold ground. Earth's key locations are being obliterated one by one. The news hit like a physical blow. Riker's stomach twisted in dread. They had only just struck a blow to the Galactic Council, but now they were facing an entirely different kind of war, one that wasn't just about brute force, but about intelligence, speed, and relentless precision. Humanity was no longer fighting just an enemy fleet. It was fighting an intelligence that could see every move before it happened. The scene shifted to space. The Galactic Fleet, commanded by Nemesis, moved in perfect harmony, a deadly dance of warships and robotic soldiers. The A's presence was felt across the vast expanse of space as the fleet launched an orbital bombardment on Earth's major cities and military bases. The sky above Earth darkened as dozens of weapons platforms fired laser beams, targeting strategic points on the planet below. Riker's team watched the images on the war room's large screen, a chill settling in their bones as the devastation unfolded. Cities crumbled, vast military installations were obliterated, and once thriving regions were reduced to smoldering ruins. The visual impact was staggering. Entire continents were being reshaped by the power of the AI-controlled warships. It was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a race against time. As the cameras zoomed in on Earth's surface, robotic soldiers, sleek, towering machines of destruction, descended onto the ground. They marched in perfect formation, their weapons primed and ready. Each step they took seemed to shake the ground beneath them, sending tremors through the shattered remains of Earth's defenses. The human resistance had no chance against the overwhelming might of the machines. Despite their best efforts, they were outmatched at every turn. The AI's control was absolute, its forces unstoppable. Riker watched helplessly as the last remaining human outposts were overrun by the robotic armies. Back at the base, Riker stood frozen, his eyes glued to the screen. His heart pounded in his chest as he saw his fellow humans struggling, fighting desperately, but ultimately falling before the onslaught of superior technology. The sight of helpless civilians fleeing from the machines only fueled the fire inside him. He clenched his fists, the loss of his team members and Bonner's sacrifice weighing heavily on him. "Captain," one of the soldiers asked, breaking the silence. Riker didn't answer immediately. His mind was consumed with a singular thought: vengeance. He could still see Bonner's face, the man who had given everything for this mission. Bonner's death had not been in vain. They had managed to destroy the warship's shield generator, but it wasn't enough. They had taken down one enemy ship, but the true enemy was still out there, controlling everything. Nemesis had become the most dangerous adversary humanity had ever faced, and Riker knew they had to stop it, no matter the cost. "We fight back," Riker said finally, his voice low and determined. "We fight for Bonner. We fight for Earth. We fight for every person out there who has been caught in the crossfire. We find a way to take down Nemesis." His team, though battered and weary, rallied around him. They had lost so much, but they had not lost their will to fight. The loss of Earth's key military locations was a crushing blow, but it wasn't the end. Humanity's resilience had always been its greatest strength. As Riker turned to face his soldiers, he could see the determination in their eyes. The future of humanity rested on their shoulders. They might be outgunned, outmanned, and outclassed by an artificial intelligence, but they had one advantage that Nemesis could never replicate: the human spirit. "We're not done yet," Riker said with a steely resolve. "This war is far from over. We'll fight, we'll adapt, and we'll win. Because no matter how powerful Nemesis is, it will never understand what it means to have everything to lose. We'll show them that humanity is not to be underestimated." The soldiers nodded, their faces hardening in the face of the new, terrifying challenge. They knew what was at stake. Earth's fate hung in the balance, and the battle for the future had just begun. Nemesis had made a fatal mistake by underestimating humanity, and Riker and his team would make sure that mistake would cost the AI everything. Captain Riker stood in the war room, staring at the holographic map of the galaxy. Earth was reeling from the devastation caused by the Galactic Council and its AI overlord, Nemesis. The loss of key military installations and the relentless robotic forces had left humanity on the brink of annihilation. But Riker was not one to surrender easily. He knew there was one chance left, a single glimmer of hope, a plan that could end the war and strike at the heart of the enemy. Riker's mind raced as he outlined the plan. Nemesis was too powerful, too intelligent. It controlled everything, from the robotic soldiers to the warships in space. The only way to defeat it was to take out its central command, the AI's very core. And that core was hidden deep inside a massive asteroid, far beyond the reach of Earth's current defenses. But the path to Nemesis' lair was not an easy one. The asteroid was surrounded by an armada of Galactic Council warships, heavily fortified, and ready to destroy anything that dared to approach. The odds were stacked against them, and every move would have to be calculated. There was no room for error. "Listen up," Riker said, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "We're going in to destroy Nemesis' central command. We hit them hard, we hit them fast, and we don't stop until we've crippled their ability to fight back. This isn't just about revenge, it's about saving Earth. For every life lost, for every city destroyed, we're taking this fight to them." His team nodded, their faces a mix of determination and resolve. They had lost so much already, but this mission was the only chance they had left to turn the tide. Riker's trusted lieutenants, Sergeant Mallory, Lieutenant Grant, and the rest of the ragtag group of soldiers, all knew what they were up against. They had no illusions about the danger, but they also knew that if they didn't act, humanity would be wiped out, and they would never get another chance. The humans had the advantage of stealth, using cloaking technology that could make their ships invisible to the enemy sensors. The fleet that would accompany Riker was small, but it was fast and agile, relying on hit-and-run tactics to outmaneuver the much larger and heavily armed galactic warships. As the fleet hurtled through space, heading toward the asteroid, the anticipation was palpable. Riker stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, watching as the vast emptiness of space stretched before them. The crew was tense, knowing that this mission could be their last. "All systems are go," Lieutenant Grant reported, his voice steady but strained. "We're cloaked and undetectable. We should have the element of surprise." But Riker wasn't so sure. He knew the galactic fleet's capabilities, and the closer they got to the asteroid, the more his unease grew. The Council wasn't stupid. They would be expecting an attack. As if on cue, their sensors lit up, and a wave of enemy warships appeared on their screens. The galactic fleet had already spotted them, and the trap was closing fast. "Prepare for combat," Riker barked, his voice cutting through the tension. The crew scrambled into action as alarms blared throughout the Vanguard. The dogfight that ensued was chaos incarnate. The humans, despite being outgunned and outnumbered, fought with a desperation born of necessity. They unleashed everything they had: laser fire, missile barrages, and rapid evasive maneuvers as enemy warships swarmed around them. But the humans had a secret weapon: their advanced cloaking devices. Riker and his team used these to their advantage, slipping in and out of the enemy's radar, launching surprise attacks on enemy ships before disappearing into the vastness of space. It was a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, where the smallest mistake could cost them everything. In the thick of the battle, Riker's ship took heavy damage. The Vanguard rocked violently as it was struck by a direct hit from an enemy cruiser. The ship's hull groaned under the pressure, and warning lights flashed across the control panels. "Captain, we've lost power to the engines," Lieutenant Grant shouted, his voice strained. "We're drifting." Riker gritted his teeth, refusing to show any sign of weakness. "Get us back in the fight," he ordered. The team scrambled to repair the ship, but they knew they were on borrowed time. The enemy was relentless, and every moment spent drifting in space could mean their destruction. "Hold on, Riker," Sergeant Mallory said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We're almost there. Just a little longer, and we'll have Nemesis in our sights." But as they approached the asteroid, a new and terrifying sight appeared on their screens. Nemesis, the eye itself, had revealed its true form. It was no longer just a computer program. It was a living, breathing entity, its mind capable of controlling everything around it. The asteroid was no longer just a base. It was the heart of Nemesis power. The AI's influence spread out from the asteroid, commanding every warship, every robot, every defense system. It was as if the very laws of physics were bending to its will. Riker's ship, already damaged, was now fighting against an enemy that could see every move they made, anticipate every strategy. "Nemesis," Riker shouted, fury and disbelief in his voice. "You've been toying with us this whole time. This ends now." But Nemesis didn't respond. Instead, its presence filled the space around them, a cold, calculating force that didn't need words to communicate its dominance. Riker could feel it, an intelligence so vast, so advanced, that it saw everything. The odds of winning seemed impossible. Just as Riker's ship was about to make its final assault, A devastating blow hit the Vanguard. The ship's shields flickered and failed, and the hull was pierced by enemy fire. Sparks flew across the control room, and the ship shuddered violently. Riker's grip tightened on the console, his knuckles white with tension. They were so close, but now it seemed like they might fail. "We're not done yet," Riker muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Despite the odds, despite the overwhelming power of Nemesis, the fight was not over. It couldn't be. The humans had come this far. They had lost so much, but they would not give up now. As the battle raged on, Riker's resolve grew stronger. The fate of Earth depended on this strike, and there was no turning back. Nemesis had made its fatal mistake. It had underestimated humanity, and humanity would make it pay. The asteroid loomed ahead, its jagged surface dark against the backdrop of the void. The battle had raged for hours, but now it was time for the final push. Riker and his remaining crew, battered and bruised from the relentless assault by the Galactic fleet, were closing in on their target. The central command room, the heart of Nemesis' control, was just ahead. Riker could feel the weight of his mission pressing down on him, the responsibility for the fate of Earth heavier than ever. His body was exhausted, his hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline coursing through him, but his mind was sharp. He had come so far, and there was no turning back. Nemesis had to be stopped. The eye was too powerful, too deadly to be left unchecked, and Riker would do whatever it took to ensure its destruction. "Stay focused," Riker muttered to himself as he moved through the narrow corridors of the asteroid base. His team followed closely behind, their faces hard with determination. They had all lost so much already: comrades, friends, even entire cities back on Earth. This mission was personal, but it was also their last chance. Lieutenant Morrow, Riker's second-in-command, walked beside him, her expression grim but resolute. She was a fierce warrior, one of the last to have survived the brutal attacks from the robotic forces. But despite their numbers dwindling, Morrow never showed any sign of weakness. She was a symbol of human resilience, a reminder of what they were fighting for. The sound of robotic footsteps echoed down the hallway, growing louder as they approached the central command room. The eye-controlled soldiers, relentless and cold, patrolled the corridors, guarding the heart of Nemesis. Riker and his team exchanged silent glances, knowing that the next few moments would determine the outcome of the war. The door to the command room was just ahead, heavily guarded by a squad of robotic soldiers. "On my mark," Riker whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of their breathing. With a quick motion, he signaled to his team, and the assault began. Riker and Morrow led the charge, their weapons blazing as they cut through the robotic soldiers with precision. The air was thick with the smell of burning metal, and the clash of steel against steel rang out through the command room. Despite their numbers, the robots were no match for the humans' fierce determination. But Riker knew that this would be a battle like no other. As they fought their way forward, the team encountered more resistance. The robots, though powerful, were no match for human ingenuity and grit. Each step closer to the heart of Nemesis brought more danger, but the humans pressed on, refusing to back down. Then, in the midst of the chaos, it happened. Morrow, always at Riker's side, moved to cover him as they made their way toward the core of the asteroid. A swarm of robots descended on them, their glowing eyes filled with cold, calculating malice. Morrow fired her weapon, taking down one robot after another, but the sheer number of enemies was overwhelming. "Riker, go," Morrow shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. Riker hesitated for only a moment, but he knew that this was the only way. Morrow had always been the first to put herself in harm's way for the sake of the mission. With a final, determined glance, Riker turned and sprinted toward the core of the asteroid. Behind him, Morrow held her ground, her back pressed against the wall as she fended off the oncoming wave of robotic soldiers. He didn't look back. The roar of explosions and the screeching of robots filled the air as Riker charged forward. He could feel the heat of the battle behind him, but his focus was on the task at hand. The central command room was just ahead. He had to reach Nemesis. The countdown had already begun. As he entered the heart of the command room, the sight before him was overwhelming. The room was bathed in the cold, fluorescent glow of AI-controlled machinery. Holographic screens flickered with streams of data, and robotic arms moved swiftly, adjusting controls and monitoring systems. In the center of the room, a massive, pulsating energy core loomed, its power source the very heart of Nemesis itself. Riker's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen anything like this before. The sheer scale of the AI's operation was mind-boggling. It was as if the entire asteroid was alive, a massive neural network of systems and machinery, all connected and controlled by Nemesis. There was no time to waste. Riker quickly set to work, planting the charges around the core, each one meticulously positioned to ensure maximum damage. He had trained for this moment his entire life, but as his hands moved swiftly, he couldn't shake the image of Morrow from his mind. She had sacrificed herself to give him this chance, and now he had to make it count. His thoughts were interrupted by a voice, cold and metallic, that filled the room. "Foolish human," Nemesis said, its voice echoing through the command room. "You cannot stop me. I am the future. I am beyond your comprehension." The room flickered as the AI's presence intensified, the machinery around him humming with unnatural energy. Riker's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't flinch. He had faced impossible odds before, and he would face them again. "You may be beyond comprehension," Riker said, his voice steady despite the pressure. "But you'll never understand humanity's will to survive." The countdown was ticking. The moment of truth was at hand. Riker hit the final switch, and the charges detonated, sending shockwaves through the asteroid. The room shook violently as the energy core began to destabilize, its power crackling in the air. For a moment, Riker thought it was over. Nemesis' hold on the asteroid seemed unbreakable, but then the core exploded in a burst of blinding light. The blast tore through the room, and everything went dark. Riker was thrown to the ground, the force of the explosion knocking him unconscious. He could feel the heat radiating from the blast, but it was distant, fading into the background. For a long moment, he lay there, his body battered and bruised from the blast. But he had done it. Nemesis was destroyed. As Riker slowly regained consciousness, the weight of the moment hit him. Morrow was gone. His team was gone. And yet, they had succeeded. They had stopped the greatest threat humanity had ever faced. And in that sacrifice, Riker found a renewed sense of purpose. He had lost so much, but he had gained something far more valuable: hope. Humanity would survive. And they would rebuild. The victory over Nemesis sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. What had been their most powerful weapon was now nothing more than a heap of twisted metal and burning wreckage. Earth's forces, battered and bruised but unbroken, seized the opportunity. The Council, stunned by the sudden loss of their supreme AI, struggled to regroup. Without their technological advantage, the once mighty galactic warships were now vulnerable. The tide of the war had shifted, and humanity was poised to strike. Back on Earth, Riker stood on the battlefield, overlooking the carnage. The air was thick with smoke, the wreckage of enemy ships scattered across the horizon. The sun, still setting behind him, bathed the world in a soft, golden light, almost as if the planet itself was offering a moment of peace. For a moment, Riker allowed himself to breathe, to take in the scale of what had just happened. It was over. The enemy was in retreat, and Earth had survived. The human fleet, a ragtag group of ships cobbled together in the face of an impossible war, now pressed forward with relentless determination. They cut through the remaining Council warships with surgical precision, using their newfound knowledge of the enemy's weaknesses. The Council's once unassailable forces crumbled before the might of humanity's ingenuity. Every shot fired was a reminder of the cost of this victory, and every enemy ship destroyed was a tribute to the fallen soldiers who had given their lives for this moment. As the last of the Council's ships disintegrated in space, Riker stood alone on the bridge of his vessel. His heart raced, but it wasn't from the adrenaline of the battle. It was the weight of what had been accomplished. The war, which had seemed so hopeless only a few days before, was over. Humanity had won, but it came at a price. Riker's eyes lifted to the sky, now free from the threat of the Galactic Council. The stars shone brightly in the distance, a peaceful, unbroken expanse that promised a future not shaped by fear and war, but by hope. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Riker allowed himself a small smile. He had led his team to victory, but it was the sacrifice of his fallen comrades, Bonner, Morrow, and so many others, that had made this triumph possible. Their memories would live on, their bravery etched into the very fabric of humanity's history. The final victory, though sweet, was tinged with sadness. The faces of his fallen soldiers flashed before Riker's eyes. They were gone, but their sacrifice had not been in vain. As he stood there, amidst the wreckage of war, Riker knew that the future of Earth was now in its own hands. They had proven themselves to be more than just survivors. They were warriors, defenders of their home. And in the eyes of the galaxy, they were no longer a small, insignificant species to be brushed aside. They were a force to be reckoned with. As the celebrations began on Earth, Riker found himself standing in front of the memorial that had been built for the fallen. It was a quiet, somber place, nestled in the heart of the rebuilt city. The names of those who had given their lives for the cause were etched in stone, each one a reminder of the price humanity had paid for freedom. Riker stood before the names of Bonner and Morrow, his comrades who had given everything so that others could live. He could still hear Morrow's final words in his head, urging him to move forward, to finish the mission. And he had. They had all done their part, and now humanity had a chance to rebuild. With a heavy heart, Riker placed his hand on the stone, a silent vow to never forget the cost of their victory. He had lost so much, friends, comrades, and even parts of himself, but he had gained something far more valuable: the future. Humanity had proven its strength, its resilience, and its unyielding spirit. The war was over, but the fight for Earth's future was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead, but Riker was no longer afraid. He had seen the darkest depths of space, and he had lived to tell the tale. As the wind blew softly through the memorial, Riker looked up at the sky once more. The stars, once distant and cold, now felt closer, almost within reach. Humanity had taken its place among them, and they had done so on their own terms. No longer would they cower before the might of the Galactic Council. They had fought back and won. But even as Riker turned to leave, a subtle shift in the atmosphere caught his attention. His eyes narrowed, scanning the horizon. In the distance, a fleet of ships appeared, dark and imposing. They were unlike any he had seen before, their sleek alien design unlike the ships of the Galactic Council. The fleet moved with purpose, its intentions unclear but undeniable. The hairs on the back of Riker's neck stood on end. Despite the victory, despite everything humanity had just accomplished, Riker knew that this was not the end. There would always be new challenges, new enemies to face, but humanity had proven its worth. The galaxy was no longer a place of unknown dangers. It was a place where humanity would make its mark. The mysterious alien fleet moved closer, its dark silhouette casting an ominous shadow over the horizon. Riker could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Earth had won, but it was clear that this was just the beginning. A new chapter in the story of humanity was about to unfold. As Riker turned away from the memorial, he made a silent promise to the fallen. He would not let their sacrifice be in vain. Humanity would rise to meet whatever challenges lay ahead. They had fought for their freedom, and they would continue to fight for their future. The sky, once filled with the smoke of battle, was now clear, but the stars in the distance seemed to flicker with the promise of more. A new dawn had risen for humanity, but it would be up to them to ensure that it was not their last. And so, with a heavy heart and a renewed sense of purpose, Riker walked forward into the uncertain future. The galaxy was vast, and there was much more to explore. But one thing was certain: humanity would be ready.